Said, I'm going to call this meeting of the January 30th OCPC Finance-Audit Committee to order. Mary, can I have I'm Megan, can I have the accessibility statement?
Megan, can you share your screen, please? That's okay.
Thank you. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Microphones or telephones will be used by all speakers. Large print materials are available upon request. If you like either of these accommodations, please contact Mary Waldron at 508-583-1833. The Notice of Non-Discrimination Rights and Protections to Beneficiaries with regard to Federal Title VI non-discrimination protections and the state non-discrimination protections is posted in this meeting room and is available on the Old Colony Planning Council website. Please contact Mary Waldron at 508-583-1833 for more information. Thank you. And I think with that said, we need a roll call, Mary.
Yes, Stephen Santisonio serving as acting chair.
Present.
Becky Coletta.
Present.
Sandra Wright.
Present.
Noreen Toole.
Present.
O'Toole. Noreen O'Toole. Sorry, Noreen.
That's all right.
And for Old Colony Planning Council, Charles Kilmer, Brenda Robeson. We also have Megan Fournier and our Sean Noel and our newest employee, Paul Umano.
Welcome.
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 Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Okay. So moving on to item number 4, consent agenda. Can we take this all at once, or do we have
Yes.
to approve all 3 individually?
Nope, all 3. It would be a motion to take all of them and to
Okay. Okay. Do I have a motion to take all 3 meeting minutes and financials in one acceptance, I guess?
So moved.
we'll need a
Have
second.
Need a second?
Second.
Okay. Can we have a roll call?
Stephen Santisonio,
Accept.
Becky Coletta,
Accept.
Sandra Wright,
Accept.
and Noreen O'Toole.
Accept.
Thank you. Moving on to number 5, December 2023 financials. Brenda?
Okay, at the end of December, we were in good financial condition, showing a 3.64% budget surplus. Statement of expenditures report shows total expenses for the month at $269,408.25. Cash position report shows income for the month at $172,033.99. Disbursements for the month were $362,479.81. The total cash available at month's end was $1,935,016.72. The OPEB account had a gain of $37,808.58, bringing the ending balance in the OPEB account to $1,076,863.19. Budget resources report, cash receipts being $172,033.99 brings the total year-to-date receipts to $2,433,498.80. The AAA report, outstanding balance for AAA pass-through programs was $668,139.21. Outstanding balance for AAA admin and ombudsman programs was $98,625.87. This brings the total outstanding balance for all AAA programs to $766,765.08. Voluntary transportation account, beginning balance was $166,983.32. Restricted funds payments to volunteers were a total of $1,225. Donations received were a total of $383.27, bringing the ending balance in the fund to $166,983.32. ROM statement and activity. Balance at the beginning of the month was $170,210.92. Receipts were $8,350, bringing the total receipts to $50,100. Expenses were $11,306.33, bringing the total expenses to $56,780.60. The ending balance in the ending statement balance was $173,823.15. Budget reports. The spent to date average percentage rate at the end of September was 46.36%. The ideal percentage in the 6th month of the fiscal year would be 50%. So at month's end, we had a 3.64% surplus. Page 1 shows expenditures at the end of December were a total of $1,335,308. Budget funds remaining at the end of December were a total of $1,544,999. Page 2, projected grant income at the end of September is $2,776,506. Page 3, there are no changes on page 3. Projected pass-through income remains at $1,719,329. Lastly is the list of combined accounts payables and cash transfers for the month of December. Sorry. And that's the end of the financials for December.
Brenda, thank you. Can I just ask Megan, can you just go up to the ROM budget for a minute? I just want to just highlight one thing, a couple things actually. Just the investments that we're making into the building. The roof, we're still dealing with the roof issues, but we're making inroads on that. Keep going, sorry. One more up. There we go. If you look on Gibson roof is at 2,600. There's also Mills Electric. We had installed some lights out front, but also some upgrading because we have more people. That means we've been blowing some fuses and having some other things that need to be upgraded, but we continue to kind of keep an eye on this. And we have monthly meetings as it relates to the ongoing operations and maintenance and of the capital. So we have basically monthly meetings to talk about the needs and we prioritize. So sometime in March, that's where we'll be presenting the capital budget of things that we expect to be spending for next year. Thank you, Brenda. And thank you, Megan and Brenda.
Thank you. Okay, with that said, we'll move on to number 6, fiscal policy
Can I
status update. I'm sorry.
Can I ask a quick question about the financials? And this is, there were some cuts to the area agencies and agents. I thought 9C cuts for the fiscal year. Did none of those affect us?
Cuts. Oh, well, that wouldn't.
State cuts.
Yes, state cuts. That would not show up here in the December budget. I really can't honestly speak to the
Sean,
state, but
well, because I know the 9C cuts that Becky's talking
Yes.
about.
Yeah, those are cuts to the state budget due to a 4% underperformance in revenue collection. These funds for AAA are all federal funds,
Okay.
which are administered through EOEA, but they're federal funds, so they're not affected by the 9C cuts.
Okay, because it sounded like there were some of the earmarks that had to do for local senior centers and the like that were on the chopping block for the 9C cuts.
They definitely were affected. It affected a fair amount of the state funding for nutrition, as well as again some of the other things. So definitely it's affecting the senior centers. They're having to look for alternative sources of income to make up the difference.
But it's not affecting our piece of the budget.
Not at this point, no.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
And Sean, probably as we move forward, we can roll that question because I know that David Klein attends the Mass Council on Aging statewide organization, so they'll keep tab on that. But if we have information, let's not only just share it with Becky, but we can share it with the committee. We might have an update tomorrow, Becky, on it for the financial tomorrow.
Okay, thanks. Stephen, do you need a motion to accept the financials?
Yes.
Yes, we do. So could we have a
I
motion
would move that we accept the December 2023 financials.
Second,
A roll call. Stephen Santisonio,
accept?
Becky Coletta,
Accept.
Sandra Wright,
accept,
Maureen O'Toole.
Accept.
We also have joining us Jonathan Seelig. And I thought I saw Yolanda, but he might have left. So, okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move on to number 6, fiscal policy status update from Brenda again.
Okay, I sent out a new draft of fiscal policies. They've been rewritten in a different format that's a little cleaner. It pretty much includes the important items from the first draft that everyone has seen. This is more in a block paragraph form, and this is the first draft. You know, there are some things that need to be fixed in this draft. I just put this together last week, so everyone needs to look through it, and you know, we need to discuss whether or not there are things that are not there that the committee feels should be included, or if something needs to be reworded. I know that towards the end of the draft, I know that we're referring to the board of directors, which needs to be changed to the OCPC board. There are little things like that that I am aware of that, you know, in order to get this to you guys for tonight's meeting, it's, you know, I didn't go through and fix. And, you know, this, I need to find out what our purchases, what the purchase amount is that requires approval, you know. So there are these kinds of things that will need to be changed, but this is an updated draft, which I think is it's easier to understand. It's not so lengthy. A lot of the things that were in that first draft, we're getting into more processes, you know, the details of how payroll is done, and that doesn't need to be in the policies. The policies need to just be an outline of what the policies are.
If I could just interject too, thank you, Brenda. We had hired Doug Silvestri to help us with that initial draft. So he was able to, as Brenda was talking about, kind of soup to nuts, including the processing. We met internally. What I would recommend is that maybe a member or two of the finance committee meet with Brenda to further we could take the time tonight, I guess, but I think to have an offline to work on this and then make the recommendation with additional tweaks back to the finance committee. But it's an initial start, as Brenda said, and streamlines to have a financial policy in place.
So anyway, so that's about all that, you know, everyone just needs to look through this, and then we need to convene again to discuss this so that we can, you know, so that we can firm it up.
So Brenda, like I said, I'm looking to have board members work with you on this.
Yes.
So I know that Christine is out of town, but I know that Christine had an interest in it. So maybe there's one or two other members that can work offline with Brenda to continue to look at this. And Brenda, you have some comparative to other organizations and what they have. Like I think Serped we pulled out.
Yes, Serped was very short and sweet. It's, you know, ours needs to be a little bit more wordy than theirs was, but you know, the format was there from Serped that I liked the way that looked much better than what we had. What we had was just too complicated, and there were too many things that just really, I feel, just didn't belong in there, because it gets more into, you know, how things are done, and I don't think the policies need to have all those details.
I would agree that you don't want too much detail, because when you talk about policies, you don't want things that if someone changes an internal process that you're going to violate a policy. As long as the policies are still met, you want some ability to organically improve internal efficiencies as you go along. And
Right.
So I would agree that you want it to be a little more streamlined.
So the other thing I would recommend, since this is just on the page, the Regional Operations Management, ROM, that is a separate entity and really should be pulled out and not be part of it. So those are the kind of things, because, right, OCPC has its own financial policies, has its own bylaws, and then Regional Operation Management, it's its own entity. And Megan, I believe that this is in the Google Drive that members can add their commentary and make some suggestions, right?
Any more questions on the fiscal policy status update? Okay, moving on to number 7, OPEB strategy update. Mary?
Yes, and so we had some discussions at the bylaw committee where this was brought up. So Megan had worked with Charlie last week to pull together this. You know, we have council members that are pretty new, and we have some council members that have been on for a long period of time. And some know what OPEB is, and some do not. So this really was put together beautifully by Megan and Charlie to end with Brenda's input as well. Just first of all, give a definition. All regional planning agencies and all government are required, municipalities. So there's some basic about this is for retired employee benefit. OCPC, as you can tell, adopted in 2012. Rockland Trust is our investment.
Fiduciary.
Thank you, Charlie, fiduciary. With the initial investment, 125,000. And again, this then brings us up more to our current effort for the new members, like Jonathan, and I don't see Yolanda on him, but there was many of our communities and board members were here, either have a relationship with Plymouth County, so it was brought up about how can we then tie into Plymouth County, and it brought up a whole nother discussion about that we needed to have a declaration of trust and have that be updated. And that's where we brought in Murphy, Hesse, Toomey, Lahane, the gentleman, the attorney that we were working with. He had then since moved on. So we had a recent meeting, and that was January, that we had a meeting with Catherine Hesse, who kind of walked us through as well as some giving us a little bit of some tweaks. So we are now, I thought it was important for us to take a hard stop, bring the finance committee up to date, and then to do a full presentation. This will be on for the board council meeting tomorrow about where we are and what our next steps are. And so you can see our next step truly is to create an OPEB trust committee. So there's 2 ballots that are going to be needed. Retirees of OCPC is 1 ballot. Another person with financial background is another ballot. I'm sorry, 3. And then the staff members themselves will be having a vote. And then there's 2 appointees, and in our bylaws, the president of the council, and that's Becky Coletta, would be the appointing authority for having a council member, and as well as a council officer. And most likely, I think the best way to be doing that would be to ask members if they are interested in serving, to then give make themselves known. So then Becky can have enough of a pool of people that she can make the appointment of. So we're looking to kind of move on this pretty quick. Finalize, please get ourselves moving. We're at the end of January already. But we'd like to have all of this really be completed. And I think it's possible by February. So we will be at this council meeting tomorrow, as well as tonight will be, if you have an interest, to send your interest to, you can send it to myself or to Megan, and we'll present that to Becky or send it directly to Becky. And then the next step really then would be having a formal vote, and we would have our ballot of the retirees, the finance background, as well as a staff member. Questions? I finally feel like we got this.
The one thing, Mary, I think is important is that if people are at all interested, the major elements of being a member of the OPEB Trust Board is to make decisions about who the investment manager will be. Right. It is not to make individual investment decisions. Right. It will be overseeing the relationship with whoever we adopt. Right now, we have Rockland Trust, Plymouth County Retirement Board, as you mentioned, and the state fund are other options to look at. But this is not something where someone needs to feel like they really are making investment type decisions. They're looking at proposals and overseeing a relationship.
Correct. Thank you, Becky.
All right, any more questions? Okay, thank you. Moving on to number 8, Mass State Retirement Board contribution. Mary, you again?
So we also talked about this at our bylaw committee and bringing it to the finance committee. And so the Mass Association of Regional Planning Associations, us as directors, have been meeting. This is the whole legislation that has been filed. It's always stays on our council meeting. And again, bringing folks up to date that the Mass State Retirement Board has been wanting Old Colony Planning Council to fully contribute. The stance has been is that we do the work of municipalities and the government, running programs and grant programs, feeling that we shouldn't and we really haven't. So I want to make it clear that employees, we as employees, we are contributing, but it's we as an organizations that have not. And so there's been dueling legislations that have been filed. State Retirement Board files theirs that they want us to contribute. And basically the Mass Association of Regional Planning Agencies is saying, hey, no, this would be this would have a catastrophe effect if we had to pay at a 6-7% contribution. So Megan, do you have the percentages? Could you pull that up? So we've been asked to provide calculations of if it's 1% of our estimated salary. So if you can see here, and this is what staff is recommending, is that we do not go any higher than a 1%. As we start, if you can see, it equates to about $18,000 a year. That's something that we feel we can comfortably, as best as we can, fit into and readjust a budget. If we go above that, we really are starting to talk about staff and cutting back staff. And so, again, all regional planning agencies have been sending this along. I shouldn't say this, all are not. Cape Cod Commission pays into the the Cape Cod,
Barnstable.
thank you. Barnstable County, thank you, Charlie. And I believe it's Franklin County and one other that
The islands, they pay into
in the
their own.
islands. That's right. Thank you, Charlie. Where they had some special legislation filed where they are not contributing. There are other regional planning agencies. I believe it's at the Berkshire that says that they can't even they can't contribute anything. So the regional planning agencies, we've all been asked, and I've been representing, but this is really a policy. And so as I would recommend that from the fiscal for the finance committee, that we are recommending that Old Colony Planning Council takes a stance that we do not contribute more than the 1%. And so then I can take that as a policy decision made by this board. And then tomorrow with the city, with the Old Colony Planning Council themselves to take that stance, because it is making a financial policy decision. And it belongs with you and not with me as a staff member.
This wouldn't need to be even rolled into like the personnel committee in any way, since you mentioned staff cuts or anything. I mean, not that you would, but since you just
Staff is
mentioned it.
already contributing what we need
Okay,
to. So
okay,
I
okay.
good question though, Stephen.
Right.
This is really a finance as it relates to the policy of I can at least say the board has taken the stance that we are sticking with the 1%.
Okay.
Steve,
Any-
Steve, if I may,
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Steve, well, I guess to Mary, so what would this do for us, or what would we gain in going in at 1%? And if after June 25, 24, if things change, can we get out of it?
So I would probably say no, we would, if one, well, there's a whole process in place, right? So, let me start with your first question again. Sorry, what was your first question again, Sam?
My first question was, what are we gaining by being in it or going in
Thank
under
you.
it?
That is a very good question. So the chairman of the House Ways and Means had asked MARPA, Mass Association of Regional Planning Agency, say, hey, I want you guys to come up to the table with something, come up with some sort of compromise. If there is a compromise? And that's where we can't even get on the same page with ourselves because we're all in different levels of ability, right? Some it's, so that's what we get. We were asked to at least put something on the table. And we feel that if we do not come back with something, then we are not respecting the negotiating committee that's been coming and working with the House chair. We've had some conversations with some of the legislative delegation. This has been ongoing since, what, Charlie, 2015 or
Yeah.
so?
It's been a
So
long time. Yeah.
it has. And so, but from my perspective, when I came in, the Mass Association of Regional Planning Agencies weren't really talking about it. There was a committee and it dissipated and sort of people just like walked away from it. And I'm saying, not that I was running to say, hey, we should contribute, but I'm like, we can't like put our heads in the sand because one day we're going to be hit with something and I'd rather be prepared than having, rather than having to get hit with a, let's say if they call it 6% with $112,000 bill, that would definitely put us out of business.
Right.
So so what do we get out of it is only a recommendation from this board that we would, anything more than 1% would really have a detrimental effect. So that's what I think that we would get out of this.
So it basically just gives you a seat at the table.
It gives Old Colony Planning Council with a formal vote of the Finance Committee and hopefully tomorrow with the board, a formal policy decision made by the Fiscal Policy Board that I can take back to everybody else and said, my board says 1%.
Well, can I jump in?
Sure.
I think the other thing it gives us, Sandy, is if we can reach an agreement with the legislature, it gives us some certainty that, if you think of it in terms of retirement benefits, some entities might be paying 6% of their employees' salary or whatever their budget is gets put away to retirement benefits. And if they ever tried to do that to us, it would shut us down or completely decimate our finances. And maybe that's enough, maybe we're too big to fail or too important to fail. But I think that coming in at a number like 1%, if we could ever reach agreement on that, would give us some amount of certainty.
And I think that is, and I think you've said it properly, Becky, that seems to be what we have a Tremont Strategies who has been suggesting we have to come with something to come up with, not coming up with anything like, who are we better than, MBTA or anybody else, right? We've made the case, it wasn't this legislative year, it was the one before where I went to testify and talked about the fact that really so many of our income, and we can go back to what, the financials that Brenda talks about, all those federal funds and state funds that come into us, really, that's who we are. I mean, our assessment, what we get is a small piece of what we do. And so that's where we're really kind of classifying we're quasi-public government and entity, but yet we're doing so much that we're not, by doing this, we at least come to the table. Charlie, did I explain that right? I think your perspective is always.
Yeah, this is the MARPA is asking for like a good faith contribution, and as you said, and President Coletta said, you have to come with something to the table. 1% is certainly better than 100%. So, yeah.
And again, sorry, I was just going to say that if we take a stance, you take a stance at say 1%, I just take that to the MARPA meeting to say, this is what the board has discussed at a very, very fruitful discussion. What the other regional planning agencies and what happens with the chair is, to be determined, right? It's, legislation comes and goes, but we still have, I believe, 6 more months of the legislative year that anything could happen. And we just don't want it to be moved out of committee without having an input.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would just add Chair Gordon would like to see some kind of contribution from the regional planning agencies in order to move the legislation forward.
Does contributing more get you a bigger seat at the table, so to speak, or?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I see it as coming up with a good faith estimate is a way to avoid them coming up with something more onerous and imposing it upon us because they feel like we're not acting in good faith.
I-
And, you know, Mary, you brought MBTA. I don't know what percentage of their budget they have to pay towards the retirement. I would assume it's a lot more than 1%.
I knew
And-
at one point it was 0.
Oh, it was from MBTA?
At one point, that was a couple years ago, a few years ago.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think
and
it's
what
just a line
about,
item in the state budget that pays for state retirees.
Right.
and what is the Cape organization paying into Barnstable County?
I don't know.
We don't know, okay. Because I think the towns have to do a better match of what their employees contribute to retirement than what we're talking about doing here.
Well, right, I think this is a whole discussion across the board on a statewide level of contributions and, you know, it's a big issue. It really is. And, but I think for us to take it in, you know, compartmentalize this for a minute for the retirement, for the, contribution is that, I felt really necessary to bring this up to this board, to the council. So at least then I have some fruitful discussion that's happening today and then tomorrow as well, that, you know, that we at least can, at the minimum of that 1%, I can bring that forward to the rest to say this is where we are. And again, there's other regional planning agencies, there's at least one that says they can't. There might be even 2 that can't even do the 1%. So at one point it was like, you know, a half a percentage point, something, right? It just has to be something. And we just wanted to show our numbers and feel comfortable that up to the 1% is what we would recommend.
So
Active.
if I may, so the estimated salary at the 1% is $1,872,700.28. That's what our estimated salary is right now.
That is,
I know we've been battling this for years.
it is.
Um,
But if you can look back across the line, so, but on an annual basis, the contribution would be 18,727.
Right.
And when I look at that, we usually end up more than 1% better than budget. So I do feel comfortable that looking over the last like 3 or 4 years, and Sandra, you've been doing this longer than I have, but I feel
Right.
like we've always had a little bit of wiggle room in our budget that we could manage 1% if that would get us certainty.
But I guess my question is the certainty worth the $18,727? Certainty for, like I said, you know, what are we getting out of it other than just a seat at the table?
Well, we get to know that they're not going to hit us with a bigger assessment to fund our employees' retirement pensions, right?
Yeah, the first year that I was here, there was a bill that came in for $550,000 and I was like, what?
Yeah, we're out of business. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So that's the part that we don't want to have. And I think that, and Charlie can speak better to this, particularly for the history part of it, but I think that there's at least the discussion and continuity of the discussion of coming to the table and looking for something. And coming in with 0, I don't believe is acceptable.
Right.
Again, the possibility of going more than 1%, but if we go back to our financials, you'll see our surplus is around 3.7-ish, right? And Brenda and I have this agreement we're gonna keep talking about is that, the important piece of all of this is that we need to, you know, when we start getting a little bit less than that is in when the flag, right? We'll be getting, that's when we'll start raising that flag to all of you. Thank you, Megan. You keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Keep
I mean,
going.
that's the number I always look at is where do we
Right
stand
there,
relative to budget?
right, 3.64, right?
Right.
So add that 1% and, I mean, I won't be able to do that easily, but that, it was 18, right? 18,000.
Yep.
It does, it just, but we need to be smart, and that's why we try to be frugal, and, you know, the things that we've been spending money on have been, you know, out of the ordinary, right? I can say we probably spent somewhere around $10,000 over the last couple, just about the security of this building. That was unexpected, but we need to spend it. So.
Or
um,
we've added staff that makes sense, that can add
Correct.
to the
Correct,
viability of OCPC as a vibrant planning agency.
that's where we need to be, right? We need to, you
Yeah.
know, and Paul, we're not frightening you away since he just, this is his second week and he did
No,
come.
we're very good about maintaining our staff. We really are.
But that's part of the things, that's why it's so important, right, when we do bring on a staff like someone like Paul. The meeting that we had this morning was in, you know, this afternoon was talking about the grants and where we're going and how do we get it out there and work with our communities. Again, the work that we're doing day in, day out, outside of a few things related to this building, is really about our communities, the needs of our communities, meeting them, working with the state, working with the federal. And so that's the case of we're doing the work in a regional fashion that's for our communities. So I would stand by my recommendation to this finance meeting, and then ultimately to the board would be to support nothing more than 1% as a recommendation of contributions if we needed to go down that path.
How often do they look at that? Like, if they agree to 1%, does that mean next year they might expect more, or is it something that's
It- we're-
1%?
I think we're still so far away because we can't even get the other regional planning agencies to agree. So we are still far away from negotiating because of the dual legislation that's been in the Committee on Public Service, who, by the way, is chaired by Senator Michael Brady, who's keeping an eye out for our interest, and is Al DiGirolamo and the senator are well aware of OCPC's stance for the situation. So I believe that is going to be the 1%, and that's what it would be until like it gets, and I don't think it ever would get changed.
Mary, can you, if I may, Steve,
Yeah.
to Mary, I always believe, you know, going in numbers, staying within the different organizations, that you stay together. You work together, you write legislations, you know, maybe if need be, an argument against it, or for or against it, I should say. I think I'd feel better if we did it in a unity than on our own. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I wasn't recommending to go on our own. I just would be looking to take this recommendation to the other regional planning agencies who would be affected by the legislation. There had been the Franklin County, because they're county government, they changed from more of a regional planning agency, more of a governmental entity, which my understanding, that's when the legislation changed, where they don't contribute because they're serving as those smaller towns in Franklin County as their government.
So
So
Mary, would we be, I'm sorry, through Steve to Mary, would we then essentially be authorizing you to go back to not to the legislature, but to the regional planning bargaining group to let them know that we could go up to 1%? If
yes,
the regional group agreed as a whole to go in at that number?
that is correct. And the reason why I'm bringing this, because while I know you all trust me, this is policy decision, and I did not feel comfortable saying, hey, this is where we are. Well, we are recommending that, and, Charlie and I have been on these meetings for a long time, but it really needed this conversation to take us to that level of going to the other, to the MARPA meeting, to say this is where OCPC stands, and then see where we are with the other regional planning agencies, then go to the Chair Gordon and others to talk about how do we get to that number.
Sandra, does that feel more comfortable?
Yeah, I think it was just an FYI, I know, going in groups, you're stronger and have more power, to get through what you want versus just standing alone. So no, I think you're right, working with the other agencies and just making sure that they stand, the same.
Correct. Yeah, thank you.
Do we have any more input questions on the Mass State Retirement Board contribution?
Nice and easy conversation, huh?
Yeah.
But
Okay,
it's important.
I agree.
So I would move that the Finance Committee support authorizing Mary Waldron to present a number up to 1% to the MARPA bargaining group on behalf of Old Colony Planning Council.
I'll second that.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
okay, go ahead. No, that was you, Sandra.
Stephen sent it to you.
Accept?
Becky Coletta,
Except
Sandra Wright,
Except,
Noreen O'Toole, and Jonathan Seelig.
Accept.
I appreciate all of you. Becky, you've said it so much more simpler than I should have done, but thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you, everyone. At this point, that's the end of the agenda. So I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
motion so moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, well, that's it. Everybody have a great night. I don't think we need to take a roll call, Mayor.
No, we don't.
No.
Thank you. I will
Okay.
see
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
you.
everybody. Bye-bye now.
Charlie, can we
Bye-bye.
stay on for 1 second for me? Thank you.
Oh,
night.
Want me to?
No, Charlie.
Good night.
Okay.
okay.
Good night,
Brenda.
guys.